Welcome back. Review session 2. We're going to talk about segmented pricing today. Now it's going to be a bit more involved, I think. Remember last time, basically said we can set one price, and that's what everyone has to pay. Now we're going to be a little more flexible and going to say, well, maybe we can charge multiple prices. And also, I'm trying to give you the intuition why we might want to do that. As I said last time, consumer demand and cost analysis is really the foundation. Now we're going to look into a little more advanced stuff. Segmented pricing is actually a fairly simple thing. When we do segmented pricing, we're trying to sell what's basically the same product or service at more than one price. When we think about people having different willingness to pay, ideally we would charge the maximum amount we can charge every single person. But that's usually not possible. We have to make sure that we sort of can identify their willingness to pay, which is hard. There are two ways in which we can do this, or two ways in which it's commonly done. One is group membership, so if you can verify or enforce a group. Very, very common example is student pricing. How do you verify that someone is a student? Well, you ask either for university email, student ID, but that's good enough, even though, sort of as a small aside, your Columbia EDU email addresses, they are not going to expire. You're going to be able to use them to claim that you're a student for a long, long time, even though you're not. That's the reason why Amazon Student doesn't work for more than 4 years, even with an EDU address. I just passed that, and now I have to pay full price. Sucks. The second way you can do this is product features. It's not, so that's what I'm saying, quote unquote, the same product. You can also differentiate the product slightly. Standard example here, if we're thinking about air travel, flying in business class or economy is not the same thing. Why is it not the same thing? Well, because we're trying to target different people. We know business travelers value the additional space much more than leisure travelers. Usually, especially in the US, first class tickets domestically come with free same-day changes. Business travelers, meeting ends early or takes a little longer, and you can change for free, more or less, a bunch of caveats, but is valuable. So that's how you can make sure that the people buying business tickets are actually business travelers and they are willing to pay a lot more. They're willing to pay so much more that you can make a lot of money off of this. But you don't want to give up on the leisure travelers, so you have economy, and especially now basic economy, where basically you give the no frills offering. What's really important here is what I sort of briefly mentioned, the concept of consumer surplus. We said everyone has a willingness to pay, this imaginary number that dictates whether they're going to buy or not, what their maximum willingness to pay, as the name suggests, is. And we're going to back out something that's basically, I'm going to call it happiness, and that is consumer surplus. How much more you're willing to pay than you're actually paying. If that's positive, you're going to buy. If it's negative, you're not going to buy. But here's the thing. If you have to choose between two different products, and you're only going to buy one of them, you're going to pick the one that has the higher consumer surplus because it makes you relatively happier than the other one. That's a very important concept. That's what we're going to need a lot with segmented pricing. Similarly, there's something called producer surplus. It's just every producer has a willingness to sell. We're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks' time. And that's just the difference between the price and the willingness to sell. Basically, willingness to sell is the minimum amount you have to make. If you make more than that, you're happy. If you make less, you're not going to sell. And you saw a concept that I still find sort of strange, but it is what it is. It's the value stick. We're basically saying we're going to try to compare willingness to pay to price to cost to willingness to sell. And we just have to make sure that everyone buys whatever maximizes this difference between the willingness to pay and the price. Now, if you want to do segmented pricing, as I said, there's two ways. You can either do it by group membership or by product features. Group membership requires enforceability, so groups must be observable and enforceable. That's the student discount example. Otherwise, if you say everyone or anyone who comes up and says they're a student is going to get student pricing is cheaper, everyone's just going to show up and say, well, I'm a student. I don't have to prove it, so might as well say I'm a student and get the better price. There's usually also capacity constraints. So when there are, we saw that in the lecture with how to fill an airliner with different types of seats. The question then becomes, should I add one more seat in business or economy? And we're going to see how we can deal with this. The key here really is that the margin of revenue, if we have to decide on a seat, be it, do we want to pick a business class seat or an economy seat to occupy some space, or one business class seat and two economy seats, whatever the equivalence is. We're going to say, well, the margin of revenue we make on the business class seat is really the opportunity cost or marginal cost of putting economy seats in. That's the same sort of opportunity cost argument that we used previously. And lastly, when it comes to group membership, there is always this fairness aspect. Senior discounts are generally perceived as good. We all like elderly people, or we should, and we're fine with them paying less. Pharma companies charging a lot more for drugs in the US than elsewhere to sort of cross-subsidize, is that fair? Much harder to say. So there's always this problem of like, how do you do this without being pissing off your customers? When you do it in product features, that's what you do if the groups are not observable or unenforceable. You can do this in various ways. It can be versioning, it can be volume, it can be bundling. Versioning basically means, well, we have an iPhone and an iPhone Pro, right? Different versions of the same phone. Volume is basically Costco, right? You're going to say, well, there are people who are not willing to pay much, but they need a lot. Those are usually, people running restaurants or people with a Costco card, and that's volume discount. Bundling also works. You can say, well, I can either buy a product alone, say, be it like, GoPro usually has their bundle where they have a GoPro and a grip and a stick and like whatever thing to put on your car and all the things. And some people really value having all of this. And they give you a tiny discount and thereby they know that you're this type of person that values it a lot, and then they can charge a different price for the standalone thing. And ultimately all of this is based around self-selection. You have these different products or flavors of products with different prices, and consumers are going to buy whatever maximizes the difference between their willingness to pay for the product and the price. And ultimately, you hope that they're going to buy what you think they should buy, and that should maximize your profits ultimately. You've seen demand curves. You know that sort of revenue we're making is basically the area under the curve. If we were to charge everyone their maximum willingness to pay, that's the money we could make. We could make the exact area under the curve, basically, if you remember from calculus, the integral under it. If we just charge one price, we only have like one of these rectangles. What you've seen in the lecture is, well, we can also charge two prices. We can charge an economy price and a business price, and then we sort of get two of these boxes. In reality, it's obviously a little different. Instead of having just two of them, you have many of them. You have first class, business class, premium economy, and I looked at the prices at some point a couple of years ago, and that's what they were. Actually pretty similar to today, despite COVID having changed a lot of things. And the reason why you do this is just exactly to get as close to covering the entire area under the curve. There are two types of problems that you're going to be able to solve after today. One is what I'm going to call small problem. They are arguably the more difficult ones, and then big problems, the easier ones. These small problems are very easy to identify. You usually have two types of customers: students and investment bankers, the elderly and the young working class people, whatever, two types of people. And there's either one or two products, and you have to identify which products to sell and at what prices and to whom. Usually they're very wordy. I know I talk a lot as well, but they're even wordier than me. You start with extracting information from this very long text usually, because there's just a couple numbers you need. And I like to put it in a table. Then you lay out the options. With one product, you basically only have the option to sell the one product to everyone, or just the people that are willing to pay more for it, relatively speaking. With two products, you have a lot more options. We're going to go over them. It's usually sell one product to them, do the same thing with the other, and then you have the interesting segmented pricing where you think, well, maybe I can sell one product to one group and the other product to the other group. Then we're going to go through the options and figure out for each of these scenarios what's the price we can charge, what's the demand we're going to see, and what's the profit we're going to make. Then we're going to compare profits and we're going to say this is the best one. It's important to do it in exactly this order, and it's very important to go through all relevant cases. If you skip a case, you're usually going to lose points because it's going to be assumed that you didn't properly calculate everything, and without having checked everything, you cannot be sure that what you're picking is optimal. Big problems look a lot more like what we've seen. You're usually given a bunch of tables with willingness to pay. Basically, for each segment, what we're going to call segment, it's usually student customers and professionals and whatever. You're going to VIPs, whatever. You're going to see an example in a second. And for each segment, we're going to separately compute a marginal revenue curve. That's just the exact same thing that we did before. Order the customers in descending order by willingness to pay. Derive the demand curve, compute the total revenue, the marginal revenue, blah, 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 standard stuff. And then we're going to use something I'm going to call waterfall technique. That's basically coming out of the intuition that every seat that we sell, or every whatever unit it is, we're going to have to decide which group it goes to. And if we give it to one group, the highest margin revenue of all the other groups is basically our opportunity cost, right? It's the second best alternative. And then we're just going to go down these tables, picking whichever is the highest margin revenue and fill up until we reach a capacity constraint, making sure that we never pick margin revenue that's less than 0 or less than marginal cost. It's the very same stuff we did before. When I said last time, it's important to use this margin revenue concept, that's because, well, in the simple cases, it's easy to just look at total revenue and pick whatever. In these cases, it gets very complicated very quickly, and margin revenue is like a super easy way of solving these things. So we're going to start with a small problem that I wrote up when the iPad Air came out a couple of years, and we're going to try to figure out how these problems work. So we're going to say you're working at Apple and you're in charge of setting the price for the 2020 iPad. There are two groups. Professionals, they're using iPads for work. They can build the clients for their work, so they don't have a really high willingness to pay. And students, they just want to take notes during lectures, as you do. There are 20,000 professionals, each willing to pay $600, and 30,000 students willing to pay $300. Cost of producing such a thing is $200. So as I said, we're going to start with extracting information. So here we know that marginal cost is 200, and as I said, this table is how I like to represent it. We know that there's 20,000 professionals, 30,000 students, willing to pay 600 and 300 respectively. Now we have to lay out the options. What can we do? Well, we only have one product in two groups. So we can sell to both. We can sell to professionals, and that's really it. Selling only to students doesn't make sense. If we pick a price that's appropriate for students, it's also appropriate for professionals, and we're back to case one. So there's only really two cases. Now, let's go through the options. We're going to start with selling to everyone. What's the price? Well, everyone has a willingness to pay of $300 or greater. So we can charge $300. That's the highest price we can charge, but while selling to everyone. If we charge more, we're only selling to professionals. If we charge less, we're losing out. Everyone's going to buy 20,000 professionals, 30,000 students, 50,000 in total. Profit? Well, we sell 50,000 units, 20 plus 30,000, and we're going to make $300 minus the marginal cost of 200 on each unit, 5 million. If we sell to professionals only, now we can obviously charge a higher price, namely the $600 that's their willingness to pay. Demand is only going to be 20,000 because students are not going to be willing to pay 600 bucks. Profit, 20,000 times 600, what we're charging, minus the 200 that it costs to produce, 8 million. Compare? Well, it's clearly better to sell to professionals only. That's the easy version of the problem. Now we're going to add a second product. There's also an iPad Pro. And we know that professionals are going to be willing to pay $800 for this more advanced, lighter device, whereas students are only going to be willing to pay $350 because they don't really need the additional features. The marginal cost is going to remain at $200, and just developing the iPad Air, sorry, I said Pro, I meant iPad Air, is going to cost $4.2 million. Is it worth it? Well, extract information. We have marginal cost of 200. We have development cost of 4.2 million. We still have 20,000 professionals and 30,000 students. Willingness to pay for the iPad remains at 600 and 300, and for the iPad Air, it's 800 and 350. Laying out the options. Well, we always have an outside option. We can say we're not going to develop the iPad Air. We already know that in that case we're going to make 8 million. That's from the previous question. We can sell iPad Airs to everyone. We can sell iPad Airs to professionals only and basically not sell iPads at all in these two cases. Or we can sell iPad Airs to professionals and iPads to students. That's the interesting one. That's segmented pricing. That's what we're here for. But we're going to do the other ones first. Outside options is that we know if we don't develop the iPad Air, we're going to make 8 million. Easy peasy. If we sell the iPad Air to everyone, well, we can charge either, well, not either. We charge $350. That's what everyone's willing to pay for. The student's willingness to pay. Demand is going to be 50,000. Profit, well, the same formula as before, just that we have obviously now 350 minus 200. That's the margin on each individual device. And we're going to pay 4.2 million in just development costs. So we're going to go get a total of 3.3 million. If we sell the iPad Air to professionals only, we're going to be able to charge $800. A lot more. But we're only going to sell 20,000 units. The profit is going to be this here now, very similar to selling the iPad to everyone, just with a higher margin. But we're losing out on 4.2, or we're investing 4.2 million, so we're only going to make 7.8. Now the interesting one, iPad Airs to professionals and iPads to students. What are the prices we can charge? Initially, a lot of you might think, well, why don't we charge 300? That's the willingness for the students for the iPad Air, and 800 for the iPad, 800 for the iPad Air. That's the professionals' willingness to pay for the iPad Air. Well, who's going to buy what? As I said, everyone's going to buy whatever maximizes their consumer surplus. The consumer surplus, which I'm going to denote V, S for student, iPad. So the consumer surplus of a student buying an iPad is 0. They're willing to pay 300. The price is 300. That's 0. That's fine. As I said, in difference, we're going to say they buy. What's the value or consumer surplus of a professional buying an iPad Air? Well, they're willing to pay 800, and the iPad Air costs 800. So it's 0. That's good enough, but what if a professional buys an iPad? They're willing to pay 600, it costs 300, they're going to get $300 in value out of it. They're not going to buy an iPad Air. They are better off buying an iPad, and that's what they're going to do. So what are the quantities? Well, actually, now everyone's buying an iPad at $300, and no one's buying an iPad Air, but we're still developing the iPad Air, but not selling any. This is stupid. So this is not how we get there. To get to the segmented pricing solution, we have to basically pay attention to two equations. And this is a bit more advanced, but it might help you think about these problems a little more, in a more structured way. The first is the participation constraint. This just means that the lowest type, lowest here is lowest willingness to pay. I'm not saying that students are low types otherwise, but that's just how they're called in econ. We have to make sure that they buy something. What does it mean? It means if they buy the cheaper product, their consumer surplus must be weakly greater than 0. And if we rewrite this a bit, it just means we cannot price the iPad higher than their willingness to pay. That we knew. This is obvious. This is easy. The interesting one is what's called the IC, or incentive compatibility constraint. It means that we have to make sure that high type, the professionals, buy what they're supposed to buy. How do we make sure that this is the case? Well, the value they get from buying an iPad Air, this VP Air, is greater than the value they get from buying an iPad. We substitute in the definition, well, the willingness to pay minus the price for both sides. We rewrite, and we're going to see that the difference in prices between the iPad and the iPad Air must be smaller than the difference in willingness to pay. This should make intuitive sense, right? The professionals value the additional features of the iPad Air by $200, the difference between 600 and 800. So the maximum they are willing to pay more for the iPad Air over the iPad is $200. So let's try again. From the participation constraint, we get that the iPad cannot be priced at more than $300. From the incentive compatibility, we get that the difference between the prices cannot be more than 200. Now we want to charge as much as possible. How do we do that? Well, we make both of these constraints binding. Means the iPad we're going to sell for 300 and the iPad Air for 200 more, so 500. Those are the prices. Quantities. Now we get the nice outcome that the iPad is going to be bought by students, 30,000 of which there are, and the iPad Air is going to be bought by professionals, and there are 20,000 of those. We can plug in the profit formula, 20,000 units we sell for 500, 200 is our marginal cost, 30,000 units with a margin of 100. and we still have to pay the investment cost of 4.2, and we'll make $4.8 million. Not done yet. All we have to do is compare prices, and we can see, well, the best thing we can do is just like scrap the iPad Air altogether, stick with the iPad. That's going to maximize profits. Not too difficult, but a bit of a tricky bit, especially the figuring out the prices. Once you have that, it's easy. Now we're going to look into a bigger problem, so the one where we have different demand curves. The German rock band Rammstein, basically, I saw them at the Jet Stadium a couple weeks ago. That was amazing. They're going to play at Madison Square Garden. This was a couple of years ago. And you're tasked with determining the price for different types of tickets in a way to maximize profits. All costs for the venue, insurance, security have already been incurred and paid. That just means they're sunk. We're not going to care about costs. Makes it a little easier. In concert configuration, Madison Square Garden seats 20,000 people. So that's the maximum we can sell. We have a capacity constraint. We can't sell more than 20,000 tickets. Well, we could, but we shouldn't. When pricing the tickets, we consider different distribution channels and also different clienteles. That sort of goes hand in hand. People interested in attending the event can either buy the tickets in advance through Ticketmaster or at the door on the night of the event. Additionally, as a Columbia student, you know that there's Columbia University's Arch Initiative, which sells a limited number of discounted tickets to Columbia students, and you already know their willingness to pay as well. And after visiting the venue, you've really identified the best seats, and you want to sell them at a hefty premium. You know segmented pricing is a thing. You want to sell VIP tickets. They make a lot of money. But to keep them exclusive, you cannot really sell more than 3,000 of them. You don't have enough seats to seat more than 3,000 VIPs in a nice place. You don't have the capacity to, give them backstage passes or whatever. So that's really limited. And the demand for each of the segments, the willingness to pay, is here. So and this is already aggregate, or accumulate, at $350, no students are going to buy tickets, and so on and so forth. We're going to look at this in Excel, since this makes it a lot easier. Down here, we already have the tables that you were given. They're already sorted, as you can see, descending order of price or willingness to pay. It's the same thing, as you know. Now, all we need to do is the usual. Let's compute revenues. Well, that's just the product between these two. Margin revenues, that's easy. I'm going to leave the first one empty since it's 0. Now the margin revenue is obviously the change in revenue divided by the change in quantity. I'm going to drop those down, and I'm going to now just copy paste these things over. All right, that was it. We have margin revenues. Now, the way we want to think about this question is basically we have 20,000 seats. And for each individual seat, we want to determine how we're going to sell them. How do we do this? Well, for each seat, we're just going to pick whatever maximizes our profits. Costs we don't care about because they've all been paid, they're sunk, so we're really only caring about revenue, so margin revenue is what we're going to go by. Who do we sell the first seat to? If we sell the first seat, or technically 225 seats, online, we're going to make $225 per seat. If we sell them in the evening counter, we're going to make $300 per seat. If we sell them through Columbia Arts Initiative or CAI, we're going to make $105. And if we sell them as VIP packages, we make $550. So if you want to think about this as opportunity cost, if we sell them as online, we cannot sell them as VIP packages. So the opportunity cost for selling online is $550, which is negative. The opportunity cost for selling the evening is also $550 because it's the highest other one, and so on and so forth. Or alternatively, the way to think about this, or the way I like to think about this, is just pick whatever has the highest margin revenue. So the first 550 seats go to VIP, are going to be sold as VIP packages. So, sorry, not 1,000 seats. So next, where are the next seats going to go? If we sell the next batch of seats online, we're going to make $225. Evening, $300. Columbia, $105. VIP packages, 450. So we're still going to sell them as VIP packages. Now, if we sell online 225, evening 300, Columbia Arts 105, 305 as VIP packages. So another 1,000 as VIP packages, and we're at 3,000. 225, 300, 105, 250. Now, the next best thing we can do is we're going to sell 1,500 seats at the evening counter thing. Now, where are the next seats going to go? Online 225, evening 200, Columbia Arts 105, VIP packages 250. We would like to sell more VIP packages, but as I said, right, we have a strict limit of 3,000, so we cannot sell any more. So we're just going to ignore this table. We have sold our 3,000 VIP tickets, and we know we're going to charge 450. So it's really just these three numbers that we're comparing, and online 225 is the highest. So now the next batch of seats, 180 if online, 200 in the evening, Columbia 105, the highest is 200, so we're going to sell a couple more seats here. Let's quickly check how many seats we've sold. So far, we've sold 8,000 seats. We still have 12,000 to go. All right. 180, 100, 105. We pick 180. 118.75, 100, 105. 118. 85, 100, 105. Okay, Columbia gets a few. 85, 100, 89. So we're going to sell 100, 85, 89. We're going to do the 89. Let's see where we're at. So currently we're at 14,200 tickets, still 5,800 away. 85, negative 100, we don't want to do that. 65. So we're going to pick 85 here. 50, 65. 65 is obviously better. Let's check again. We're at 17,000. 50, 45, we pick 50. And now if you check 12,000 online, 4,500 evening, 500 Columbia, and 3,000 VIP brings us up to 20,000. So we have filled the stadium, and we're going to sell tickets online for $125. We're going to set aside 4,500 for people that just show up at the evening and want tickets, and we're going to charge them 200. Columbia is going to get highly discounted tickets for 75, but like only 500 tickets, and VIP packages are going to sell for 3,000 each. 3,000 VIP packages at 450 each. As I said, these are really the simpler problems, and that's all I have for today. With that, you should be more than capable and able to solve any kind of problem of that nature that someone might throw at you. All right, see you in the next one.